Mrs. Kyndley's Christmas. Written by the Reverend Wilbur Audrey. Originally published 1952 in the Railway Series No. 7, Toby the Tram Engine. Read by Doug Wilson. It was nearly Christmas. Annie and Clarabel were packed full of people and parcels. Thomas was having very hard work. Come on, he puffed. We're feeling so full, grumbled the coaches. Thomas didn't pay attention to them. He was looking at the hill ahead. Can I do it? He puffed anxiously. Suddenly, he saw a handkerchief waving from a cottage window and felt better at once. Yes, I can, he puffed bravely. He pulled his hardest and was soon through the tunnel and resting in the station. That was Mrs. Kyndley who waved to you, Thomas, his driver said. She has to stay in bed all day. Poor lady, said Thomas. I do feel sorry for her. Engines have heavy loads at Christmas time, but Thomas and Toby didn't mind the hard work when they saw Mrs. Kyndley waving. But then the weather changed. It began to rain. It rained for days and days. Thomas didn't like it, and nor did his driver. Off we go, Thomas, he would say. Pull hard and get home quickly. Mrs. Kyndley won't wave today. But whether she waved or not, they always whistled when they passed the lonely little cottage. Its white walls stood out against the dark background of the hills. Hello, exclaimed Thomas's fireman one day. Look at that! The driver came across the cab. Something's wrong there, he said. Hanging, flapping and bedraggled from a window of the cottage was something that looked like a large red flag. Mrs. Kyndley needs help, I expect, said the driver, and applied the brakes. Thomas gently came to a stop. The guard came squelching through the rain up to Thomas's cab, and the driver pointed to the flag. See if a doctor's on the train and ask him to go back to the cottage. Then walk back to the station and tell them we've stopped. The fireman went to see if the line was clear in front. 2 passengers left the train and climbed to the cottage. Then the fireman returned. We'll go back down to the station, said the driver, so that Thomas can get a good start. No need. We shan't be getting up the hill, the fireman answered. Come and see what's happened. They walked along the line, rounded the bend, and... Jiminy Christmas! Exclaimed the driver. Go back to the train. I'm going to the cottage. He found the doctor with Mrs. Kyndley. Silly of me to faint, she said. You saw the red dressing gown? You're all safe? Yes, smiled the driver. I've come to thank you. There was a landslide in the cutting, Doctor, and Mrs. Kyndley saw it from her window and stopped us. She saved our lives. God bless you, Mom, said the driver, and tiptoed from the room. They cleared the line by Christmas Day, and the sun shone as a special train puffed up from the junction. First came Toby, then Thomas with Annie and Clarabel, and last of all, but very pleased at being allowed to come, was Henrietta. The Fat Controller was there, and lots of other people who wanted to say thank you to Mrs. Kyndley. Beep, 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 beep! Happy Christmas! Whistled the engines as they reached the place. The people got out and climbed to the cottage. Thomas and Toby wished they could go too. Mr. Kyndley met them at the door. The Fat Controller, Thomas's driver, fireman and guard went upstairs, while the others stood in the sunshine below the window. The driver gave her a nice new dressing gown to replace the one spoilt by the rain. The guard gave her some grapes, and the fireman gave her some woolly slippers, and promised to bring some coal as a present from Thomas next time they passed. Mrs. Kyndley was very pleased with her presents. You are good to me, she said. The passengers and I, said the Fat Controller, hope you will accept these tickets for the South Coast, Mrs. Kyndley, and get really well in the sunshine. We cannot thank you enough for preventing that accident. Hope we have not tired you. Goodbye, and have a happy Christmas. Then, going quietly downstairs, they joined the group outside the window and sang some carols before returning to the train. Mrs. Kyndley is now at Bournemouth, getting better every day, and Thomas and Toby are looking forward to the time when they can welcome her home.
And now for something completely different.
Hello.
Identify yourself.
I'm Santa's elf. Have you been good this year?
Exterminate!
No, please! Oh no!
And now back to our scheduled programming.
Thomas's Christmas Party. Written by Britt Allcroft and David Mitten and first broadcast in the United Kingdom on 25th of December 1984. Adapted for audio and read by Duck Wilson. Mrs. Kyndley had a lovely time in Bournemouth and came home a few months later. Thomas, Toby and Percy, who had by now joined the Farquhar engines, were very pleased to welcome her home. Weeks passed, and soon it was Christmas once again. The Farquhar engines were kept very busy carrying people and parcels up and down the branch line. Everyone was happy. Only the coaches, Annie and Clarabelle, were complaining. "It's always the same before Christmas," they groaned. "We feel so full. We feel so full." "Oh, come on, you two," replied Thomas as he set off back down the valley. "Where's your festive spirit? Christmas Day is almost here." By the entrance to the tunnel stood the Kyndley cottage. As Thomas emerged, he saw a familiar figure standing by the gate. "Peep, peep," he whistled. "Happy Christmas!" Mrs. Kyndley happily waved back. Christmas just wouldn't be Christmas without Mrs. Kyndley, mused Thomas as he approached Tidmouth. He left the coaches at the station and went to the sheds for a quick rest. There, he found the other engines. All their coats had been polished and they shone in the sun. "Ha!" said Gordon. "Just look at us. Your driver will have to work fast to get you looking as smart as us." "Well, never mind about that now," replied Thomas. "I've something important to say. Do you realise it's been a whole year since Mrs. Kyndley saved me from a nasty accident?"
"Yes, of course," interrupted Edward. "You told us how she hung her dressing gown out of her bedroom window to warn you about a landslide ahead."
"But," said James and Henry together, "the rest of us have never thanked her properly." "No, indeed," agreed Thomas. "So I think we should all give Mrs. Kyndley a special party." The engines were excited. They felt sure the Fat Controller would agree, as indeed he did.
"A party for Mrs. Kyndley?" he said to the engine's crew when they presented him the plan. "That's a wonderful idea."
But as so often happens at Christmas, the weather had other ideas. 3 nights later, Sodor was hit by a white-out blizzard, and when the engines woke on Christmas Eve, they found the island covered in a thick blanket of white. The Fat Controller came to see Thomas. He looked far from cheerful.
"Mrs. Kyndley is all snowed up," he announced. "We must work to get her out. Toby says he'll help to rescue her, but you'll have to help too, Thomas. Toby can't clear all that snow on his own."
Thomas hated snow. He'd been stuck in it more than once, and as a result of those experiences, was all too happy to help someone in the same situation, especially a dear friend. "Of course, sir," he agreed. "We must help Mrs. Kyndley."
"There's a good engine," said the Fat Controller. "Good luck."
Thomas and Toby headed up the branch line. Thomas charged the snowdrifts fiercely, whilst Toby followed with workmen in Henrietta. Sometimes Thomas could push the snow aside, but sometimes he stuck fast and the men had to dig him out. It was hard work, and long too. But at last they reached the cutting by the cottage. "Bust my buffers! Look at that!" exclaimed Thomas when he saw the snow. "Peep, peep," he whistled. "We're here." So deep was the snow that the answering wave had to come from an upstairs window.
Then they heard a familiar voice. "Don't worry, Thomas. I'm here too." "That's Terence," said Thomas happily. "He's come to help too." Sure enough, Terence had a snowplough and was busy clearing a path to the railway line and safety. At last, the Kyndleys were free. Percy arrived to take the tired workmen home, whilst Terence and his driver promised to look after the cottage whilst the Kyndleys were away. Thomas and Toby headed back. No more snow had fallen, but as they approached Tidmouth's sheds, not a creature was stirring. Thomas's heart sank. Suddenly, all the lights went on to reveal the sheds had been decorated with banners and lights, as well as a beautiful Christmas tree. The Fat Controller told the engines he was very proud of them for rescuing Mrs. Kyndley. Mrs. Kyndley especially thanked the smaller engines. "Thomas and Toby are good friends," she said. "And now, Percy, you are my friend too." Percy was happy. "3 cheers for Mrs. Kyndley," he called. "Hip, hip, hooray!" The party was a great success, and Mrs. Kyndley could think of nowhere she would rather be than with Thomas and his friends on the island of Sodor.